Hello there, Commonwealth from here, and we are now in March, meaning less than a month to Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. But there's a big unknown when it comes to that presentation, namely The Legend of Zelda, the franchise that had a big new Zelda game coming out for the launch of the Nintendo Switch, and which also concluded the Nintendo Switch presentation in 2017. Most likely, that will not be the case this time, as a new Zelda game is pretty much zero at this time, when we had a brand new open-air Zelda game in 2023 and a brand new top-down Zelda game last year in 2024. So we are limited to the realm of remakes, remasters and ports. There have been indications from different sources. We have seen codename leaks, we have seen some listings that then have been delisted, talking about Zelda remakes, bringing us in many ways towards three different directions, so quite fittingly, a Triforce. The top one, and the one that probably we would all love to see for the launch of a brand new system, is following the strategy of the 3DS, namely bringing back Ocarina of Time in a new format and probably for its final remake. A chance of a new trilogy, as we also talked about in our Future of the Legend of Zelda franchise video. And why would Nintendo do this? Well, for one, they know that Zelda sells. They know that Zelda is a franchise that is able to provide the numbers, especially if it's 3D and if it's relatively open. Like, the possibilities with having a 4K Ocarina of Time is that you could expand the map. The existing one, make Hyrule Field bigger, make Kakariko bigger, Castle Town, at least giving us the streets that were not available in the prior versions, and so on. It's a game that has a lot of potential and that would definitely be able to also steal the show, maybe not to the same degree as Mario Kart or a new 3D Mario, but it would still be able to make headlines by simply being, well, Ocarina of Time, one of the best-selling Zelda games and also the best-rated game of all time. That is definitely the Triforce of Power, because, well, that's also where a lot of the game centers around, and setting in motion and also bringing back the Hero of Time after a 10-year absence, as we saw in the case of, well, at least when we played as him in Majora's Mask. And Majora's Mask is a game that could also follow in 4K if, of course, Ocarina of Time in 4K is successful, as we saw in the case of Ocarina of Time 3D, which then granted us a few years later Majora's Mask 3D. Obviously, we prefer this instead of having it upscaled. Yeah, that is pretty much the Triforce of Power, hopefully a Final Fantasy remake style situation. If successful, could even result in a trilogy, so adding Majora's Mask later down the line and hopefully a brand new Hero of Time game, which would conclude his story, since Twilight Princess in the end didn't do that. But we'll get back to Twilight Princess a little bit later on, but when it comes to the Triforce of Wisdom, and that only means one thing, that means the Hero of the Wild and Breath of the Wild. And this game is probably the most likely to show up in the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, mainly because it is already an open world game that exists and is the easiest to bring over after the Zelda team has been very busy both in regards to Tears of the Kingdom and also starting development of the next Zelda game so that it doesn't come out too late on the Nintendo Switch 2. In the meanwhile, they didn't do any DLC for Tears of the Kingdom, which means that they could have had time to add something extra to Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch 2. And one of the things that we didn't get for the original Breath of the Wild was the third DLC, as that one developed into Tears of the Kingdom. But there is potential, for sure, and one of them comes from Monolith Soft's tradition now of adding epilogues. And it's something that was speculated about before Champion's Ballad came out, namely having a little story of Link and Zelda finding out their places in Hyrule after the Great Calamity. And that could be interesting because could create a world where we actually, when we defeat enemies, they don't get respawned because, well, our job is to clean up after the final Blood Moon well, at least until the Great Upheaval and Ganondorf's return. As it is, I think that is the best solution. Obviously, it would be a very much technical showpiece, showing that the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually capable of what it's been rumored to do, namely upscale our games to 4K, while also providing a relatively stable frame rate. And if you can do that with Breath of the Wild, it means that you can do it with pretty much any game. Maybe Tears of the Kingdom would have been a more, what would I say, demanding test. If you buy the Nintendo Switch 2, even though it's backwards compatible, can't really start with Tears of the Kingdom. You have a story from Breath of the Wild. So that's why we have heard about these Gamescom 2023 leaks, where we got pretty much a confirmation that the game was present and in that format. And what's more, we got the codename leak just a few months later, where it was titled as U-King-O, which is an extension of the original codename of Breath of the Wild, which was U-King. So, do I think that this is going to be the Nintendo Switch 2 game that will be revealed in the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct? I think the probability is quite high. I think that we're in a year where we have not many anniversaries. It's pretty much just Majora's Mask and Triforce Heroes, which are all sequels to other bigger and more popular Zelda games. I do feel like Breath of the Wild, say 8.5 years, or at least well over 8 years after it came out, which we are also celebrating obviously as part of this video, I do feel that that is the most likely candidate. It just makes sense. It's the best-selling Zelda game of all time, and Ultimate version probably, and hopefully with new content, it will sell. It will definitely sell. It's a game that, if brought to the UI standard and some of the visual standards that we have been gotten accustomed to in Tears of the Kingdom and then some, then I feel like this game is bound to sell another, maybe not 30 million, but somewhere between 10 and 15 million as we go on, which would bring Breath of the Wild obviously to maybe even close to 50 million in total when we include the Wii U, Switch sales, and the Nintendo Switch 2. The only thing that might prevent sales, obviously, and why they might not want to reveal it compared to the other examples, is that Breath of the Wild, it has already been confirmed to be backwards compatible on the Nintendo Switch 2. Meaning that the game is technically already there, but then again, that was also the case with Twilight Princess on the GameCube compared to the Wii. There will always be differences between versions, and in the case of the GameCube, you didn't have the same widescreen and motion controls that you had on the Wii version. So by adding enough differences and new content, I have a feeling that Breath of the Wild will sell very well on the Nintendo Switch 2, and maybe set precedence for a Nintendo Switch 2 version of Tears of the Kingdom later down the line, of course, much later during the generation, because we prefer to get a couple of other remakes beforehand, and mainly I think we all agree that the lack of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on the Nintendo Switch hurt, but obviously the main reason for their lack, and also that being our green, or the Triforce of Courage, is tied to the fact that it would just be Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD again. They were already remasters and remakes on the Wii U, not brand new games as we see in the case of Xenoblade Chronicles X, Super Mario 3D World, and many, many others. As a result, it might be a good idea to wait with these games until we can pretty much name them something else and give something that you couldn't have had on the Switch and obviously not on the Wii U. And that is obviously 4K. And who knows, maybe a little bit of added content. Like, you always need to add something, and that is something that we have been gotten accustomed to with these Wii U to Switch ports, is that you get something extra for buying this version of the game. But in this case, I have a feeling that the demand for Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD will make so that a Wind Waker 4K and Twilight Princess 4K will sell very well. It's games that a lot of people want to play. It's games that have the scale, the storyline, and also the gameplay to perform very well. Do I think it will happen? If it's going to happen at any point, I have a feeling that this might be the year, yeah. Games that Nintendo has been holding off, and if they want to wait the traditional 10 years between a new Zelda game and then a remaster/remake, then obviously, in that case, Breath of the Wild 4K could come later down the line. All of these games are candidates that will bring solid sales. Maybe Breath of the Wild 4K might not be able to bring the same level of excitement as the case of Ocarina of Time 4K, but also Wind Waker 4K and Twilight Princess 4K. But it also, of course, depends on whether Nintendo wants to play with anniversaries of any of these things. We know that Twilight Princess has its 20th anniversary next year, along with the 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda in total. And usually in big anniversary years, you want also the biggest games. And Ocarina of Time obviously is a part of that. We saw that it was one of the big 25th anniversary releases back in 2011. Just coincided, of course, that the 3DS launched the same year. You guys think on the possibilities? So a 3D game after the 2D game that we had last year, part of the 2017 repeat plans, so that being Mario Kart, 3D Mario, and Zelda. And if you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and press the notification bell. And for all notifications, last but not least, a big thanks to all of you who watched until the end, and to all our great patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to Raw Producer, JC Funk, and Heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.